I actually see this as largely half Western and half Full House. It's why it works so well. It gave people both things. But the Western is that there's this rugged dude, and he's part of us that all men probably have deep inside of us because we're compelled by society to whoop somebody's ass when they call us a bitch and protect our family by any means necessary. And Walt's actually going to the extreme to follow the rules of patriarchy that he's giving up his reputation. Hey everyone, today I have a fun conversation with Maddy, my badass part-time co-host. We talk about Breaking Bad as a Western and as a family sitcom, and we also kick around religion, media literacy, and the way our cultural position intends to influence our reaction to media productions like Breaking Bad. While I'm on that topic, I realized the other day that I've never actually done an episode about Stuart Hall's theory of encoding, decoding, which would really help in this convo because a lot of what we talk about is different perspectives, different takes on the same scenes. So here's the quick story on Stuart Hall's encoding, decoding. It should help you dig what we're about to say here a little bit more. Stuart basically says that our old models of communication, the way humans typically think about situations where someone's trying to communicate with someone else, either by writing a letter or yelling across the room or making a TV show called Breaking Bad, that model used to be a simple receiver-sender framework where, say, I make a message and I send it to you, and you might or might not receive it. You might misunderstand it, or you might be confused by it, or you might totally dig it. Success. That's the general understanding, says Stewie. Fun name, but that's a bit flat, actually. Instead, we should think about communication, and especially media, as a code-breaking activity. The guys making Breaking Bad, and there's a lot of them, writers, producers, directors, funders, the AMC bigwigs, even the advertisers on AMC have a lot to do with what ends up on the show. All of them, they have a set of values, beliefs, positions, norms, rituals. They each have their own, but they probably also share a lot of them because, well, for one, their salaries all come from the same place. So they're likely to share values associated with, say, the value of media, or their work ethic, or norms surrounding acceptability on TV, stuff like that. Now, do you think they're going to deliberately violate their own values and norms in their show, in the product they produce for sale? No way. In fact, they'll almost certainly paint their worldview as the right worldview, because, as they all know, they are right. Anyone who thinks otherwise is just stupid or misinformed. So these guys have friends they talk to at parties and beliefs related to religion or capitalism or gender or who knows what else. And while they might produce scenes that show people violating those values and those norms, they'll always include a storyline that shows their viewers why that person is wrong. Say the main character punches a woman in the face in the first scene, a violation of values and norms in almost any social circle in the United States. Producers might show that, but you can be damn sure that in mainstream media, that guy's going to get his in a few minutes. A bus is going to run over him, or maybe his mom's going to kick him out of the house. I don't know, something like that. So even when they do show us scenes that violate social norms, the science teacher making meth, a husband sexually assaulting his wife, a woman cheating on her husband, all things from Breaking Bad, they'll always fill those stories out with the just desserts that seem appropriate to them from their cultural perspective. They're always going to put their values into their productions. Okay, so the producers, they take those values and they work really hard to figure out some way to encode them, to put them into the script or the movie or the show. When you want to teach kids about the dangers of drugs, for example, you can just say,
I'm here to tell you about drugs and alcohol and why they're bad, okay? So first of all, smoking's bad. You shouldn't smoke. And alcohol is bad. You shouldn't drink alcohol. And as for drugs, well, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
But if you really want to communicate that message, You get a bunch of writers in a room and you construct the script of Reefer Madness. You code your values of anti-drugs, pro-capitalism, gender normativity, patriarchy, all into a script, and then you hire actors to perform the lines and cameramen to film it. And what you get is what Stuart Hall calls a meaningful narrative, a story that, if you do it right, can go out into the world where lots of people with lots of different values will still pay you to watch your film, even if they don't fully agree with your values. And where those who do agree with you, well, they're going to wind up feeling like they like your product a whole lot more than everybody else. So, one more step. The consumer, the viewer of the film or the TV show, well, we also have a unique set of values, norms, beliefs, rituals, relationships, friends, networks, and when we watch TV, we bring all that shit with us. This is why in my episode with Dr. Dixon from a few years back, when he told me the story of being in a movie theater when Heat, a 1990s movie, yeah, I get it, old, anyway, when that scene of bank robbers being pinned down by the police ends with the bank robbers opening fire in a massive shootout, he said many in the theater cheered for the bank robbers. We can be pretty sure that a group of wealthy Hollywood producers and writers weren't trying to show us a story that made us all want to be bank robbers, but this is what decoding is. The viewer also gets to bring our own set of values and norms to the production, and we get to choose what Stewie says is one of three options in regard to the messages we're offered, the scenes we view. Hall says we can either say, hell yeah, I fully agree, or we can say, fuck no, that's dumb, I don't agree. And that there's a third option that's also pretty interesting, what he calls negotiated meaning, somewhere in the middle of yes and no. It sounds something like, well, yeah, but. So how's this work? Well, the first episode of Breaking Bad is a good example. It starts and ends with Walt in the middle of a road, in his tidy whities, like my dad used to wear when I was a kid, pointing a gun at a bunch of approaching cops. Yikes. So how do we decode this? Well, we either say, yup, I guess it's time you pull the trigger when the police close in. Fuck it, shoot it out and die like a man, Walt. Or we say, what the fuck kind of idiot would try to shoot it out with the police with a 6-shooter? He's just in the ditch. They might drive right past him. They're there for a fire. And the negotiated meaning would be something like, well, Walt really shouldn't be killing cops. That's stupid. But, you know, if I was in his position, I'm a pretty good shot and I could probably hit the cop's tires and then run away. I don't think that's what producers were trying to convey either. So Hall's point is we all go to these narratives and bring our own values with us, and producers can't help how we decode their narratives. Okay, so with that super short summary of Stuart Hall, which is probably way overdue, here's Maddy to talk about Breaking Bad. What does she wear at the beginning?
She wears purple. Purple is her color, and then as time progresses and they learn who Walt really is, she stops wearing purple.
Okay, it's slowly changed. So I think I'm in the section now because I think we're on season 3 or something. Walt's already completely broke bad, but you can tell she's starting, they're focusing in, and we'll talk about today, on how everybody's a dialectical creature, and even the most righteous, how dare you, sir, I'll never have that in my house. When you watch her close, even the DEA agent, when you watch them close, they all make their own exceptions to break the law. But don't worry, they have the right view of what law should be followed and what not. That Jesse Pinkman guy, he's a monster. That Heisman guy, she's a monster. But she's going through her own Breaking Bad. It's just a lot slower, and eventually, where she's headed is she becomes like his co-manager. I was sitting here thinking, are we going to spoil this for people? And I'm like, this is a 12-year-old. It ended 12 years ago.
Yeah. God, freshman year of college, I wasn't doing too much of analysis work on media, so I didn't necessarily know what I was doing, but I was really drawn to the aspect of light and how that portrays characterization. Like, maybe that's a coincidence. Of course, we want our beautiful Hollywood productions to be lit and dark at certain areas, but I think what I found most interesting is that Walt's character, Heisenberg, was always kind of half dark, half light on his face when he was giving his monologues, or there was some shadow of some sort on his face that kind of proved that he wasn't this amazing person and he wasn't all bad either. And that it kind of inspired my worldview at the time because for an impressionable young viewer who had just come into quote unquote adulthood, I think it was interesting to learn that people are not just good and bad, because I think we learned that as children, that there's bad guys and there's good guys, and we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. So it's us and them.
Yeah. Your paper, you used a term when you were describing it to me called characterization. That's,
yeah.
I'm assuming, and you mentioned some of it already, is about trying to figure out what is each character reflecting back to the audience, something like that.
It's not just what they're reflecting back, but what they represent. And I think Heisenberg was, I think we can get into him later, but the side characters like Jesse Pinkman was kind of this young, troubled boy who was turned even more troubled by a quote unquote good person. All of these butterfly effects in the show.
Person? Who's the good person?
Because Walt was originally intended to be a good person in the first episode, at least.
Yeah, we're starting at the beginning, and you did say we start by viewing it as there's only good guys and bad guys. I was going to say,
yeah,
I don't
we
see
do.
Anybody in this show is a good guy or a bad guy. That's how you know it's good TV. All good guys are bad guys by the end of the episode.
I mean, we don't root for the cartels
but at the
in
beginning,
Breaking Bad.
When I mean reflection culturally, I mean like they're... What we were talking about with bodies, the producers are always going to show us something that gives us something to chew on or something to think about. And what you just said about the good guy, you're starting the show out just coming in as an American citizen who probably isn't like in the middle of a bank robbery, or if you're doing something illegal, you know you better hide it. You know what status quo, follow the rules means. And that means we look up to certain people and other people are not so good. This dude's chemistry teacher, and he's actually a dude who seems way fucking smarter than the job. And so as audience members, most of us feel as adults like, thanks for your service, man. He's doing a good thing. And Pinkman is not just a student, but he's a shitty student who...
And Walt's got cancer. That's the first episode, is he's diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
But that's what you mean by good guy. So as he changes, of course, he becomes a bad guy. But just so... I wanted to make sure on the same page. That's what I mean by reflecting. What they're giving us is as soon as we tune in, they don't have to tell us a ton of backstory for us to love the guy. Shit, if he was a real human, it'd take like a year for me to actually trust and love him. But man, it's a produced character on TV. It takes about 8 minutes, and I'm like, oh.
It's just the spectacle, and I was thinking about that earlier. I know this has nothing to do with Breaking Bad, but I was just talking to someone about how they were disappointed that they couldn't help rape victims tell their stories publicly, like publishing an article about their rapist. And I asked why, because I think that sometimes it is important to kind of expose those people, but I think it's also, it's tricky situation. But she said, I just saw no story there. And that's the kind of thing, like everything has to be a part of the spectacle, sensationalized. It has to be new and great. And that's our news cycle. That's our news media. So I think this show kind of represents that. I think Breaking Bad is always giving us something new that Walt does that's horrible or good. And we can judge him based on that. But I think it's funny that we always find Walt to be the protagonist in this show. The cartels, they're so mysterious. They're even, if we're thinking about like colors, like they're always portrayed in dark lighting to show that they're all bad. And of course, they're trying to show that Walt is a complicated person. But I also think they're trying to put Walt as this protagonist of like, no, he's winning at the drug market. This white man is doing what we should all do in the drug market. No, it's not right. They're not gonna publicly say, oh, Heisenberg is great, because
I think they kind of do. But yes, I like what you're.
They're not. I mean, they're just. Yeah, it's just they're not going to distinctly say, "Oh, Heisenberg is the best of the best," and this is how we support him and we want him.
Which is really weird because meth is still, to this day, fentanyl might beat it a little, but it's still the hated of hated drugs. Stereotypically, the media spectacle machine you're talking about was fully assembled by the time meth got big on the scene. And with crack, it mostly was, but not with the internet like we got now. And because of that, the stigma that was on crack was the result of mainstream TV and radio and media at the time being huge and being utilized. Meth was even bigger, so people have much more stigma around meth. For us to see a chemistry teacher sell meth to kids and literally kill people at times, but still at times feel like, I mean, to some degree I'm on his side, we should be looking at what the fuck is reflecting at us that we're so, and it's patriarchy. It's this idea that as a man, your responsibility is to protect your family. This is a I actually see this as largely, as weird as it seems, half Western and half Full House. It's why it works so well. It gave people both things. But the Western is that there's this rugged dude, and he's part of us that all men probably have deep inside of us because we're compelled by society to whoop somebody's ass when they call us a bitch and protect our family by any means necessary. And Walt's actually going to the extreme to follow the rules of patriarchy that he's giving up his reputation. And some weird fucking part of an American sees that and knows that they're supposed to value it, but we don't really know how to put it into words, so a TV show reflects it to us, and we just kind of like, I don't know, it's a fun show, right? Occasionally he does shit that's so beyond the pale that we're like, what the fuck? But even some of the fucked up shit he does, the reason is always family is everything, right? It's this trope in media that just makes you love an asshole.
Well, thinking about the audience when those scenes happen, like when he lets Jane die or his meth ends up selling to a bunch of parents who hurt a kid, and Jesse has to be with that kid. Like, I think that's a tough watch for audiences because a lot of them haven't been exposed to that, but a lot of it is just like fantasy. It's not all drugs are going to lead to this path, and I think the way that Vince Gilligan and the creators of the show created this Breaking Bad series is that they're trying to show that all drugs are bad, but Heisenberg kind of rises above the rest because he's doing it for family, like you're saying. He has reasons. And I think they portray these members of the cartel like, oh, well, they have no reason. They have no children. They have no wife. They cheat. Like, they just portray people as horrible. And then Heisenberg is the white savior.
There's your culture being reflected back at you. We started talking about a conversation you had with somebody in the publishing industry, and the point of that little tidbit was that the system, if it's built well, it actually protects the people in power without the people in power having to do anything. So in publishing, what sells? Number one, spectacle. So we'll sell the scandalous story where somebody did something to somebody else, even if the guy that did it was powerful, if we can make it salacious and people will want to read it. Say he did it to like somebody else famous or somebody we love. But number two, it's got to be so watertight that you can blame any libel on somebody else, because power means I can sue you out of existence even if I actually did the fucking thing. This is why Diddy didn't get caught for so long. It's why Trump's still getting away with it. He's suing the fuck out of people for things that they're saying that are true. And the system's built so they kind of just want to, there's too many gears and levers, just pay the fucking guy off and say sorry about that and move on. And those are both systems issues that reflect and leave individuals feeling like, who the fuck am I supposed to blame? Is it the publisher? Because you can't really feel like you're supposed to blame anybody else, but it's actually the system that if the publisher didn't abide by those rules, they wouldn't be there. I see that with the producers of Breaking Bad too. I think they're in a culture that, number one, if you want to go mainstream in an institutional culture like ours, you have to agree with the majority of institutions. So if they start saying, blue meth actually will improve your grades and whatever, that whatever happened there, better and badly. And then two, like the other shit we're talking about, capitalism. This dude is the capitalist of capitalists. That's a good thing in our culture. He's protecting his family. The scene where he lets that girl die is to protect his, call it symbolic, it's not his real son, but Jesse at this point has become this guy he's like taken up who needed a father figure. He's taught him how to get by in life, and now he sees this girl as a threat. And back to what you said, the trope of suddenly heroin comes into the situation, and instead of showing us a real world scenario where you haven't used in a while, so you dabble a little bit, they both go from never using heroin or her not using for months to pulling out a needle and straight up shooting dope for like
which is not realistic. You will die. To our listeners, you will die.
But it's fun. That only works because it's a cultural story, a meta-narrative that's already floating around culture, and we should be paying attention to the fact that when those are the mainstream, a trillion people watch it even 12 years after it went off the air, those are the stories that get viewed over and over. That means they're reflecting it back to us in the best way. They're really hitting the nail on the head. Which is kind of gross to think about, because even though some of those things probably make sense to most listeners, like, yeah, save your family, protect your people, they're making us see how it can play out. It is extreme to be put in a situation where you let somebody overdose, but anybody that's watching that's getting past the guttural, oh, what are you doing, is like actually doing the same math. They're thinking to themselves, would I have the guts to do that? Would my morals take me to the same decision? Maybe not, but how close would I be? That's magic.
Yeah, I think to add to the drug part that Jane and Jesse took part of, I'm pretty sure it was black tar heroin, which is just a
Yeah.
false dichotomy of heroin, but it's like seen as the scum of scum. Like if you're a scummy person in society, allegedly in media, you will use black tar heroin.
That's funny. You know what the difference is?
No.
The where you're at in the country. So if you are on the west side and more south, it kind of bleeds like an L. Because Colorado, we actually still get a lot of powdered, what you would call China
Yeah,
white, which is weird.
I've seen the powdered heroin here.
It's where it comes from. So the East Coast gets shipments from the Western world, from Europe, usually from Asia, Afghanistan for the longest, and it's white China, powdered heroin. In Mexico, they make it using a different process. It's not quite as pure, and it turns into black tar. So the only difference is the
It's
different
made by
cultures-
Mexico, yeah.
Different cultures make it in a different way. And they are in New Mexico, but I haven't been down in New Mexico enough to know the drug culture. I wouldn't be surprised nowadays if even the dichotomy isn't as strict as it once was.
I think there still is, at least at the time of filming in Breaking Bad, because of course they're distributing meth and they're seeing destruction around them, which we could argue is false fantasy or not. But, you know, they're also depicting black tar heroin as the worst drug you could possibly do. She doesn't overdose from it. She throws up and chokes on her vomit and dies. And he lets that happen. And then Jesse has to wake up and come to terms with that. And he really sees no consequences brought to him naturally. I think he confesses to Jesse about it, and Jesse becomes very angry, as he should. And I think he runs away. I haven't seen the show in a long time, but
Poor Jesse.
I just know
He does.
I just
He eventually comes back because he always does.
he always does, and I
That's
think
also
that's that.
symbolic in our culture, right? Abusive
Paternal figure,
relationships
yeah.
and a dominating culture, a patriarchal culture like ours. So many of us can understand, even if we still say in the end to Jesse, like, don't go back, Jesse, you know what's going to happen. We're doing the math, and very few of us are like 100% don't go back. I don't know why you did it. This weird fucking human thing in neoliberal culture that says, look, all the products I consume are abusive. All the advertising I consume is lying. It's abusive too. I'm surrounded by abusive people. I can't accidentally cut somebody off without them flipping me off and trying to beat me up on the side of the road. I guess that's just the way things are. That's a natural hot tub effect for a human. It's just, again, interesting to see it reflected back at us.
To add on to that, I think it's interesting how the show is inherently patriarchal. The women in the show do not have a large role. They're kind of more seen as the influence to calm the man down. You know, like that classic scene in Avengers where Black Widow calms down the Hulk and is like, the sun's getting real low, big guy. Kind of like being their pacifist.
I should have made you watch specific episodes again, just because I think that's not true for a portion of it. That
For a portion.
a man
Sure.
made me feel like I still need to work to be a better feminist, because I am so mad at Skylar. Like at the end of season 2 onto season 3, when she starts cheating on purpose and then rubbing it in his face. And I'd realized the other day, Heisenberg, he never cheats. Never. In the whole series, does he? He never has sex with anybody except
But
his
doesn't
wife.
he lie?
Yeah, but he
I
never
just think
actually.
they're
I mean, in our, I'm still doing culturally, because this is a huge reflection that I even had to recognize in myself as I was feeling the way I was. That like, it's the smog Tatum talks about. I've lived in a patriarchal culture my whole life. I know what feels quote unquote regular or right or wrong. I know what a good woman is, what a good wife is, what a good man is, what a good husband is, and all that shit's bullshit. And I've rejected it, and yet it's still my base programming. So as I'm feeling pissed off when Skylar's acting a certain way, I'm realizing it, yeah, but that's because I have an idea of what feminine and masculine should look like in a relationship with a 16-year-old disabled kid, and god damn it, she's not doing it right. I'm being a bad feminist.
Right, but I think we're more compelled to spectacleize. That's not a word, but it's going to be a word today.
like it.
Spectacleize Heisenberg
It might be a
in the sense that we kind of like how bad he is. We like that he lies to his wife. We like all of this. But then when Skylar goes and cheats, I remember watching this originally with an ex-boyfriend, and he was so mad that Skylar was cheating. He was actually calling her like names, and I'm like, girl, she's not real. Like, he was so emboldened by it. He just couldn't stop talking about it. And I was like, because you feel so entitled to that woman. And that's why I think it's inherently patriarchal. And these women don't necessarily play a role. I have it. I don't really remember the earlier seasons, but I do remember that Skylar is either pregnant or cheating or raising children. That's kind of her only role. She becomes an accomplice, but not really. She puts herself in that situation.
No. We'll revisit this if you... It's weird how quick I can watch it again. I usually have to wait 7-8 years. I think it's been 3 or 4 since we watched it, and I clicked just an episode the other day because I'm assigning it for a class, and I was like, so take my classes, they're fun. We watch Breaking Bad. But I was watching that episode and was like, well, god damn, I remember it kind of, like I was telling you, once you get to be my age, youngin', you'll realize like some of that stuff gets a little foggy and you're thinking of that Full House episode I mentioned earlier and you thought it was Heisenberg that did it. First of all, I think I should give myself a little credit because I do try very hard to recognize all the shit I just said and be a good feminist. She is a very unlikable, an actress who can portray unlikable, incredible. She's got a great set of like facial characteristics that just make you want to be like, you snarky fuck, right? So that makes it happen a lot, but I don't think it's that he felt obligated to her body so much as he feels obligated to this concept of male and female roles in heterosexual monogamous relationships, whereby it just means something different if the man's fucking around or lying than it does if the woman does. And even people like me, this is kind of what my point was, even guys like me that have recognized that's really problematic, it still at times hits me right in the face, and I find myself having an emotional reaction. Like, this is how humans work, Jonathan Haidt said. We have a moral, emotional reaction, and then our brain starts saying, oh, here's why you feel angry or anxious or disgusted right now, as you described from your ex, who was like, she's a cheating-ass, scandalous bitch, I can't believe, whatever it was. Then I started trying to tell myself what's really going on, and I'm even realizing that I think a lot of that's just rooted in what representations of hetero relationships do we see that we could even use to... We've seen 1 trillion times where men step out on women, and the women get mad, but they stay or they leave, and maybe it causes a divorce, but it's done a certain way. And when women step out on men, always in our representations, it's been depicted differently. It's more tragic. It's more... against the rules. It's usually a complete break in the character, like a fucking psychotic episode or something, but it's really rare. I'm trying to even think of, can you think of shows or movies where women are like Sex in the City? And it's the whole point of that show is that you've got women who aren't being the right kind of appropriate feminine women. And it's not even all of them. The other ones discipline the ones that do it.
Well, I do want to challenge one of your beliefs that it's not about bodies. I think it is about bodies. I think it is about you talked about how it's not really about Skylar's body, but this idea of heterosexual normality and this loyalty that you have to your husband because he provides everything for you. I think it was about her body. In the very first episode of the show, she's pregnant, and it's not her pregnancy, it's Walt's child. When Holly is born, it's Walt's child. He demands to see his child, even though Skylar carried it. We can get into who's really responsible for a child in pregnancy and everything. I don't want to get into that, but...
Do women have more rights to a baby than men?
I think so, yeah. I think...
Are you sure that's not cultural? Because it is cultural, right? We both agree that in our culture, fuck yeah. That's my normal cultural answer. That's not... You're not going to get disciplined for saying that in the U.S. But you also think beyond that it's still the right answer? I think it might be a cop-out that men have used this excuse so long to get out of our fair share of the responsibilities that it's now bled down to the level that women have had to soak up the extra effort for fucking ever. And now, like, because of that effort, of course, once you've put in more effort raising somebody, you kind of deserve more rights. But when are we going to start building it the way we probably should, where there's just equality and men feel fucking compelled to change diapers and be there for their kids? See, I'm a feminist.
I think Walt did feel compelled, and I don't think he actually felt like this nurturing love towards his child. I think he felt entitlement towards another woman's body, and that was his daughter. He did not feel the same towards his son. He did not want to see his son. He kind of let the 16-year-old, who became 18, then 19.
Oh, okay, so now I'm caught up. We were talking about your boyfriend. I thought you were making this like almost pornographic claim that he was making an objective claim about Skylar's body, and he didn't like that she was... You mean Walt? has an ownership
Walt,
claim on her.
yeah,
Oh, fuck yeah.
Walt.
Okay, I'm totally caught up with you. In fact, it started before that. There's scenes when he finally starts to take control by doing something illegal, and he immediately comes home and gets in bed with his wife and like doesn't quite rape her, but it's pretty fucking close. And then there's another scene where she literally has to like push him off of her when they're
And she's
married. So
pregnant.
what you're saying, the ownership, this is that patriarchy that as viewers we don't put up with him. The other scene, you probably remember it because she's wearing like green guacamole on her face, and he is trying to like push her over and pull her panties down, and she says, "Stop it," and he hits her head on the fridge and like guacamole sticks. So there's like, for the rest of the episode, Junior comes home and he's like, why is there guacamole on it became a thing throughout. So maybe you remember that scene if listeners have seen this in the past, but that theme is the underlining thing of the theme of the show. We should be completely, as viewers, like, that's the end for this dude. This is a character that I hope he gets hit by a bus tomorrow, because that's how dialectics usually works in TV. You show us the most horrendous thing ever that somebody does, you better show us pretty quick that motherfucker getting what's coming to him, so I know the world's a good place. Why else am I watching TV? He doesn't need that, because we give him something of a pass because it's his wife, because we understand what patriarchy is, because he didn't go all the way. Good cultural artifacts reflect all that shit back at us.
Well, Breaking Bad largely had a white viewership. Heisenberg and Walt, or White, whatever you want to call him, he was so popular because he was white. Like, there's this huge element of race here. He's white in New Mexico. He's dealing with all of these cartels of like Latinx people, and he's clearly winning against all of these. So he can rape his wife. He can lie to his wife. He can be a horrible father to Junior and to everyone. He can do horrible shit, kill a kid, but he's going to be great because he's a white man and he's taking control of the drug economy.
Yeah, you gotta
market.
give people their due, though. It's not just that. Totally on your side that we still have this pre-programmed thing that I'm going to be quicker to give Walt a break than other people. It's not just because he's white, though, because we got to be intersectional. We're bringing Kimberly Crenshaw, come on in. So we just invited Kimberly Crenshaw into the conversation, but he's a chemistry teacher. Does that make us more likely to forgive him? He just got over brain cancer. As fucked up as it might be, lung cancer. Does that actually, his brother-in-law's a DEA agent and he sells drugs. As weird as it seems, that makes me feel a little bit more like, okay, I kind of like the guy. This shit's just going on under the surface, simmering, and then, like and you're saying, it reflects in these patriarchal moments.
It's that characterization, because Hank is seen as this asshole. The DEA agent is an asshole. Yeah, he's an asshole, and Walt is not. But then Walt becomes an asshole, and we're still kind of like, well, I like him, you know?
This is the Western, right? You ever watch Westerns?
Yeah.
The Hank mentality versus remember what Hank becomes? Because I think this is every character in the show, if it's where you're headed.
Well, Walter dies of cancer. He faces literally no consequences for his drug actions. At the end, he dies.
He doesn't die. Not from cancer. He's a Jesus trope. He kills himself to save Jesse in the end to make up for his sins. So we do get our revenge
arguably,
as viewers.
he never... I think
he literally goes on a suicide. You're saying maybe he would have died anyway, but that's still, as a viewer, when I see a person, whether it's a man or not, but if it's a man, it's better. It's the oldest. It's Jesus. It's why the fucking Jesus story works. The Jesus trope, this idea that if a man lays down his life for other people, especially in our culture, family, because of patriarchy, that's the hero of heroes. That's the only reason at the end some of us can walk away and say, is Walter a good guy or a bad guy? 50-50, 60-40, but that's a lot of weight in my mind. I don't agree with it. I'm saying as a viewer, like when I see scenes like that, I'm like, well, culturally, good job, guys.
Culturally, yes, I think they did depict Jesus. He is a martyr. He had never naturally assumed consequences for his actions.
Yeah, okay. But again, you got to split this, because here I'd say, I'm noticing this right now. He just came clean to Skylar, and she kicked him out. He's coming back at the beginning of season 3, and he's trying to say, like, this is going to turn into her helping eventually. She just gives up and says, all right, I'm in. But right now she's still saying, what the fuck? And she's about to snitch on him to her attorney. She's real close. He just showed her a big bag of money, and he's trying to come clean. In that degree, you're right. Every time this is patriarchy. As a man, when you go do the grimy thing because a man's got to do what a man's got to do, and then you bring that shit home, you're not doing it right and you're going to be disciplined for it. In Breaking Bad, like, your discipline is that your wife's now going to tell on you. Walt, you should have just stayed the nice chemistry teacher and she never would have had a problem. But on the other side, he's not disciplined when he's honest. In the drug world, this is why I see the split. I see Full House meets like the spaghetti John Wayne Western. This is the split I see in all Westerns between masculinity and raw manliness, these tropes of like the man who takes drugs or has to use the medication versus the man who can do it by himself, the man who has to go to the therapist versus the man who just toughs it out, the man who gets called a bitch and says, oh, it's okay, and the man who says you want to step outside. There's this weird divide. In Westerns, we actually almost always see progress in society win out, but in Westerns, almost always in the beginning, the John Wayne, I'll shoot you up. He walks into a town and he has problems because he encounters society, culture, and he's always like, fuck you guys, and somebody laughs at him, and then he leaves, and in the end, he saves the day, because you know what? We do need masculinity, the producers want to reflect to us, but to save the day, he also has to conform to some sort of this softer other side. In Breaking Bad, it's him finally sacrificing himself and just giving up to save somebody else's life. But you can imagine in the end of Westerns how the character who's the hard, tough, I'm going to kill everybody, shaves his beard, sets down his gun, marries the damsel who ends up, ding, 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 changing his ways and bringing him to Jesus. You don't get that in this because he kills himself. Anyway, I see that Western image reflected too, that there's the, fuck it, I'm going to solve it with violence, and on the other side, the refined, progressive man who's here to use science and logic and reason. And Walter's also showing us this is what Westerns do, the tension between the two, and how you actually, in our minds anyway, you need both. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem for a man to whoop somebody's ass. I don't think that, but that's what our culture seems to think. I thought you were an atheist, but lately you've seemed like you have some sort of religious something. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. But it feels more along the line of, like, we talk about your generation a lot. One of the options your generation, like, it doesn't feel that weird. It doesn't, like, when I hear you say it, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it does sound more Gen below me.
Gen below me. I like that.
Any of them. Well, they're all they all have some things more in common than my generation has.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think astrology is just another excuse for religion.
What's God's name?
Thing. God's name is the Zodiac. The Zodiac.
Does the Zodiac give people any real information?
Yeah, about themselves, yeah. About the world, how they interact with the world.
But is it real information, or is it random static that people just find
It's random static, for sure.
So why use it? Why not find something that's not random static?
Religion is random static.
I know. I would say don't use that either. Oh, are we still stuck in the dichotomy? Okay. Yeah,
sure, there is a dichotomy.
One or the other, but
I think it's a false dichotomy. I don't really think there's a difference. I think they are the same.
All right.
I think it's just a belief system on how people perceive the world and themselves.
How you feel about the Iran stuff?
Oh my God.
This is your generation's first time.
Yay, another world's longest war.
But this is the first one, right? For your generation?
Not really.
Like real war?
Well, the one that we just got into, that we started in our generation, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I am quite pissed at the people, my generation of Americans on TikTok who are like, oh, I'm going to be drafted, and they make jokes about this war. Gen Z making TikToks, especially when you're an American that is arguably going to be safe from the effects of this war, shut the fuck up. Know your place. Like, there are kids dying in the Middle East, and you want to be like, well, everyone's getting drafted. Come get a haircut by me at French Salon. And it's stupid. It's so narcissistic and selfish, and it just makes me very disappointed. I've left some comments, I will admit, of like, this is crazy, knowing that people have actually died and you're twerking for a haircut.
This is America. Anyway, Breaking Bad, we were mostly there. I like adding the spaghetti piece, or the Western piece, just because it also gives people a way to see that, like, Westerns go over the top to reflect back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when they were most popular to those Americans, something that they don't really know how to put into words, and there's a tension there, so, like, you can show a lot of people the same scene, and many people can see the same character but say different things about him. Fuck that guy. Ooh, I like Walter White is the epitome of the same thing. the layer below that is how are you walking away from this feeling about drugs? And they definitely are not taking the opportunity to be a counter narrative, to give us a different story about drugs that challenges what we already think. And they definitely are doing negative damage. For one thing, they're making people think that meth is sometimes blue. There are now stories of life imitating art where people dye their meth blue so they can say it's Breaking Bad meth, but that was like total fiction. That was a whole thing they made up because they needed this is like the Burning Cross, and
they needed the spectacle. Yes, yeah. They needed the Burning Cross of the KKK. They needed something to trademark themselves with.
Mm-hmm.
When I dressed up as Jesse and my friend dressed up as Walter White, we had blue Jolly Ranchers in a bag. We were 19.
That's good. I like it. You just crushed them up and then... Did you guys have something like a pipe so you could pretend to smoke them?
No, we didn't even think about that because...
The meth is what's cool. That's interesting that it's receded from the real life to the spectacle, and the result has been that the meth is now more important to some people than what the meth does inside you. You want it outside of your body.
People won't know who you are if you dress up as them unless you have that bag of Jolly Ranchers. Yeah. So that's kind of the spectacle. That's the Burning Cross, the trademark.
Yeah, they are both pretty ambiguous. You're right. Like, I guess the glasses for Walter would help, but...
The fedora, but I don't even know, because you could be any...
Jesse dresses like me.
Palmer said he looks like every other man.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry to this man.
No, and that's the other thing about Walt, and both of them, but Walt is like this trope character that showed up forever called the everyman, the Tom Hanks, the character that you just know pretty quick after meeting him in a movie, like, oh, I don't know how to change my own oil either, or the dad who has a garage and 5 wrenches and kind of knows how to do 1 or 2 things, but doesn't actually, and he breaks stuff, like Tim Taylor, and breaks stuff all the time, but knows stuff, that sort of thing. You see that reflected too, but it makes me wonder where drug media is going, because it's been 12 years since this ended. There have been some drug films, but as I'm rewatching this, I'm realizing, like, this was fucking media magic. They did a really good job making it compelling, but they also did all the shit you're talking about. We haven't talked about almost all the major drug competition is people of color, mostly Latinos, and most of the people here making it are white folks. There's this weird clash where when you meet Walter White, you see he can be a monster if he's got to, but he's actually a very nice guy. And when you meet fucking Tuco... Holy shit, my dude. God. Yeah, it's the Euphoria guy whose name I'm suddenly forgetting. The terrible drug dealer who gets killed in the end of the last season they made.
The good guy?
No, the drug dealer, the torch.
Oh, Mouse.
Yeah, Mouse. He's like
Mouse. Mouse was not in Breaking Bad.
I meant Euphoria if I didn't say it. He's like the guy in Euphoria. Tuco in Breaking Bad is like the equivalent. He's a psychopath, and the second you meet him, you're
Mouse
like,
but Mouse is not even a comparison to him, because Mouse is... I know. You're not talking about the white guy. You're talking about the racially ethnic, like, ambiguous guy. Yeah.
He's Latino.
He's supposed to, like, represent, like, people of color and drug dealers and everything. Yeah.
He's scary. Yeah.
He's scary, and he gave Rue fentanyl, and yeah. So I understand what you're saying, and then...
and the crossing the borders. I hadn't noticed the first time, but there are multiple scenes where after Tuco's killed, and the producers are like, God damn, he was a good monster. How do we get a better monster? And then they get Danny Trejo, which had to be fucking expensive. And then they kill Danny Trejo, and now what do you got to do? Well, somebody killed Danny. He's got to be a better monster. They get two brother monsters. I don't think they're twins. And I had noticed this time, again, reflecting cultural fears that we don't really know how to put into words. These guys just bleed back and forth across the border without anybody noticing, and they commit mass murders and crimes on the way back and forth. And, like, there's something interesting now that we're seeing what Trump's doing with this fucking ICE shit, that this has been this cultural tension that's been building for a long time. And in the 2010s, when this was first coming on the air, those scenes gave people a way to either say, oh, Jesus Christ, that's not who crosses the border, or to say, see, I know that they're letting people out of criminal asylums, they're criminals, they're rapists, they're drug dealers, they're wearing like $1,000 suits, and then they take them off at the border, hang them on a clothesline, put on worker suits, and just walk across the border. You just wander across the border and kill people.
Yeah, I'm so glad that's the narrative our country leads with.
As always, thanks for listening. And if you want to reach out, or if you want to hear about any specific topics, also, as always, you can email drjunkieshow@gmail.com. See you next time. Trump or Vance?
I think they're a package deal because I think they have sex with each other.
I've finally come to the conclusion Trump is a Christian, and suddenly that makes perfect sense now that I said it. Pen or pencil?
Pen,
Joint or blunt?
joint.
All right. Vape or
Listen,
cigarette?
I don't really like
Yeah, I
tobacco in my joint.
I get it. Vape or cigarette?
Vape.
Gum or mint?
Gum.
Jason or Freddie?
Neither.
Drake or Kendrick?
Kendrick.
Astrology or religion?
Astrology, it's better than religion, I think.
See,